Right, so the lecture that I prepared is giving you an overview of how to compute attribute risk, okay, attribute disclosure risk. So far what we've been talking about is mostly identification disclosure, right? Like the three summaries that we've been talking about. And so we know that disclosure risk have two types, attribute disclosure and identification disclosure. Identification disclosure is looking for identity of people in the data set. Attribute disclosure is looking for how correctly we can infer the like the true values of the synthesized value, right? So in the the example we're going to use is the consumer expenditure survey again, and that is the case that the income is being synthesized and everything else stays the same. So the question becomes, I mean, for attribute disclosure risk will be that how easy it is to somebody or an tutor to correctly guess the true value of the synthesized income of a CE. Okay, so that's what we mean by attribute disclosure. So the estimation process is quite complicated, as you hopefully have read about in the section that I asked you to read about on this methodology. So the lecture, I mean, actually follows pretty closely of the description in that section of the paper. But I'm just gonna like go through it, and then also just happy to answer any particular questions you have. And my other class, you have to have my Slack question all of a sudden. But anyway, so then I provided some demonstration using R, how to do the computation. And in addition to the estimation process, I think there are some computing techniques involved, which might be beneficial overall. I mean, not only for this class, but then for other things that you might be doing. So that will be another, I think, highlight of what we're gonna talk about today. Okay. So without further ado, let me bring the slides, and the slides is also in the lecture folder if you want to take a look. And we're gonna start talking about the attribute disclosure. Right, so this will be the last part of the the last section of the last session of the methods for risk evaluation, and this focuses on the attribute disclosure risk. Okay, so we're gonna give you a quick overview, which is also including a outline of what we're gonna do today, and then some of the other material. Okay, so attribute disclosure, like what we were talking about earlier, refers to the intruder correctly inferring the true values of the synthesized values in the released synthetic data set. Okay, so for the CE, we know that the income is synthesized. So we're looking at this kind of disclosure where the intruder can correctly guess the true value of the synthesized income in the CE data set. And so attribute disclosure, we also use AR. Attribute disclosure risks, we use AR for short. Potentially existing fully synthetic data set and partially synthetic data set. So this is also a distinction between AR and IR. So IR is the identification disclosure risks. We were talking about it only really existing partially synthetic data, right? Because fully synthetic data, you change every value, nothing is left for you to match with. So we typically think there's no identification disclosure risk in fully synthetic data. However, attribute disclosure could exist in fully and the partial cases. We're going to focus on the partial, I mean, mostly because it's easier to think about, but also I think for most of your projects, many of you, pretty much everybody of you, I think is doing partial synthesis, so that will be more related to what you're doing, I think. So for today, we're going to talk about the notations and setup in this setting. And there will be a few key estimating steps that we're going to introduce, including importance sampling technique. We're going to introduce what it is, and then in the illustrative example of the synthetic CE sample, we're going to show you how to do importance sampling and some other techniques along the way. So this, again, will be useful if you're going to evaluate any attribute disclosure risk in your project. And this is really just a like a overview of how things can be done. And you might have to, like, just like what you're doing right now, to develop your synthesis model. Well, we talked about various cases, or like depending on what kind of variables you're working with, what kind of models you can use. As you were going through it now, I'm sure that there are a lot to it as you dig into it. So evaluating attribute disclosure risk is just another example that you're going to see that inevitably you will have to do a lot of digging into and then experimenting to make sure that you know what you're doing. Okay.